This third segment of soil and arthropod-borne diseases starts out with tularemia. Tularemia, or Francisella tularensis, is a gram-negative rod. This bacteria is considered a Class A or B bioweapon. It depends on what you're talking about. This is transferred by arthropods, like ticks, but it is extremely easy to cause airborne infection. One of our most recent airborne infections, and it wasn't a huge amount of people, but was caused by running over a dead rabbit that they didn't see in the grass when they were mowing. And this neighbor did this in Martha's Vineyard. It's a nice, pretty little place off the coast, and aerosolized it. And the aerosolization in the neighborhood, just of chunks of rabbit flying in the air, caused 20 people to die, or roughly. And very quickly, this bacteria needs about 6 organisms to cause a full-blown infection and death. This is a lesion caused by rabbit fever. It's an open, gaping, wet lesion. The orange on it is the iodine. But it is also known as rabbit fever because it has been associated with trapping rabbits, and also, of course, the Martha's Vineyard infamous report of running over a dead rabbit with a lawnmower. So you can have it through a bite, which is probably where they got this. You can get it through infected meat, so you can eat it, and you can get it in air or water. It's the perfect vector, which is why it's considered a biowarfare agent, as well as its quick and very definite mortality. So you can have a hemorrhagic lung infection, hemorrhagic pneumonic symptom that will can kill within 16 hours. So people working on this have to look out for a dry cough, or in this case, a very wet cough, and fever, and get treatment immediately on this. I'm not going to talk about it much more than that because we can talk about it in our biowarfare area. I'm going to talk about something near and dear to Wisconsinites' hearts, dear as in concerning, Borrelia burgdorferi. This is the causative agent of Lyme disease, and Lyme disease is a spirochete. It is an organism that lives as a reservoir in rodents, and this is an important point. Deer ticks are only the vector by which the bacteria is passaged. And basically it starts by having these eggs hatching and larvae coming out, and the larvae have 6 legs, and they are not in the arachnid class, and I want to point that out because they do not have the actual picture correct here. They will start feeding on small rodents, and the small rodents are where they get the infection of the Borrelia and a couple other diseases that we'll briefly talk about. The first blood meal allows them to grow into intermediate animals or insects, and they have a rough childhood because they adolescence, because they grow a 4th set of legs during this time. So they're infected, they live on the brush, and they run into intermediate animals, which are usually deer, larger mammals, and then humans. And they feed on them. They can infect them with Lyme disease, or they can infect deer with the Lyme disease, and the cycle can continue. So it goes from eggs to larvae to intermediates to feed on us again, to get enough blood for development of eggs and reproduction. So on to the infection. This is known by a classical bullseye rash. We used to think that less than 50% of the cases had it. It turns out it's closer to 80 to 90% because we just weren't looking in the right spot. You'll have this main area of rash, usually a fever and aches that turn into almost a arthritis, and definitely arthritis. And then you'll have this changing area of redness, and this is where the actual spirochetes are swimming through your tissues and causing inflammation wherever they go. So this bullseye can move. Sometimes it's found in sites that you're not able to view very well, or in the hairline or what have you. Here's that spirochete again. um, it doesn't actually glow by itself. We're just using visualization techniques to see it very well. The only problem is, there's many problems with this. It will not go away. So it can spread to immunocompromised areas or um, um, areas where the immune system will not go. So you can have an extreme immune reaction attacking this bacteria in the heart. So you can have permanent heart damage. You can have nervous system effects that we're starting to understand now, or at least identify and acknowledge now. And immunoprivileged sites such as the joints where the immune system usually doesn't go, the bacteria will go there, and the immune system goes in there and damages a lot of these cells, such as the cells that will produce extracellular matrix, such as cartilage. So the cartilage protecting the bone in these moving joints starts degrading and is not replaced, and that's where you get arthritis. So if you treat this with some extreme antibiotics, doxycycline usually, um, but we've been finding some of the species of this that cause similar disease do not respond well to doxycycline. So we have to be more aware of what species we're looking at, and accept that Lyme disease, the actual disease, is caused by multiple species of Borrelia. Some of these Borrelia species do not test positive for Lyme disease because we're looking for the wrong bacteria. There is some evidence to suggest that there are nervous system involvements, and it can cause long-term nervous system effects. So this is still a developing bacteria that the CDC is finally acknowledging. There are a number of different bacteria, or a number of people that get infected by this. The CDC in 2016 finally acknowledged, in 2017, I'm sorry, finally acknowledged that there aren't 30,000 infections per year. There are 300,000 infections per year, focused on the upper Midwest and the northeast coast, and spreading downward. So there are a lot of cases of this spread by the deer tick, specifically, a very small tick, hard to see. So Borrelia species causes a lot of disease. Borrelia recurrensis is spread by body lice, and you can have this relapsing fever. Borrelia recurrensis, recurring fever. So you can only find or test positive for the bacteria in blood smears when you have symptoms. So you have to wait until the symptoms to actually detect it and then kill it with antibiotics. We have newer methods to detect the bacteria, but we don't really know where it goes in the intermediate for this. So it can be very frustrating to identify for treatment. Finally, there's a whole range of emerging infectious diseases that we need to identify. This is the wood tick, the Rocky Mountain wood tick. Is very small. Fleas, as we know, are very small, and probably the smallest of all is the louse, which can cause spreading of rickettsia infections as well. What these rickettsia infections look like, one of the most infamous is Rickettsia rickettsii, and that's a Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We find this interior to cells, and here's the nucleus, and here's some mitochondria, and these are bacteria living in this lysosome or endosome, at least, inside the cells, and they cause a very dangerous infection called Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You have a fever, you have these raised spots, and it has a very high death rate. And it is found in certain areas endemic to the Rocky Mountains, oddly enough. And so they will give you warnings once we start getting positives that you have to watch out for these ticks. Luckily enough, these ticks are fairly large, so you're able to identify them. You just have to do a tick check afterwards. But if you start getting symptoms of this in those areas, the doctors will know immediately what it is and put you on antibiotics so you do not die of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Typhus is known as something that can be spread by body lice. It was something that was very common in World War I, but it is associated with war, famine, and poverty, because when you have large amounts of people that cannot wash themselves or too close together, such as in not only concentration camps, but also in camps for people displaced by war, you have to be very careful to take care of their bodily health, as in making sure they're clean, because keeping the body lice from spreading and causing this disease will keep typhus from spreading throughout in a large encampment. So the CDC, or not the CDC, the World Health Organization has these response units that will put up these camps in a very orderly way to make sure that these associated infections do not spread. Uh, People die. A lot of people die in these typhus outbreaks if they do not get proper treatment. This is different than typhoid fever, but we can have typhoid fever even in San Francisco, as we're finding. Now, there is a typhus by mice that has a less dangerous effect. And we have this scrub typhus called Tsutsugamushi fever, which is fun to say, but it is also carried by an arthropod, this time a mite, and it is found in Asia in the Pacific theater here. So there's a number of them in the Rickettsia family that cause types of typhus. And finally, I'm going to talk about Ehrlichia. Ehrlichia is another infection that causes, well, frankly, almost, well, flu-like symptoms in people in their blood. It used there's two different forms that'll cause different kinds of similar symptoms but different vectors. They're both carried by the tick, and we have Ehrlichia in the Wisconsin area. We also have anaplasma in the area, but both of them will infect white blood cells, or leukocytes. So when you do a blood smear, you're looking for these white blood cells, which oddly aren't white, but you'll see these balls in them, these like I don't know, studded balls, and what they are is actually the Ehrlichia or the anaplasma, depending on what it'll infect. So these can be pretty dangerous, mostly because they have these very interesting side effects of confusion. You'll have conjunctival infection in this as well. So both of these have been found in deer ticks. I actually found Ehrlichia in deer ticks, only one deer tick, but still out of 250. 20 years ago that was a thing. Anaplasma, they're still working out how to identify that. Some of these are so new that even 20 years ago, we didn't even know or acknowledge that some of these were a thing, or even knew what bacteria would cause this, or what parasite would cause this. So it's something to look for and be aware of for anybody in the healthcare field, that sometimes you can get things other than Lyme disease from these ticks, especially in the Midwest. I think we are done for right now.